Director of Emerging Security Trends. He will be moderating today's webcast. And Juan Canales, Senior Manager of Enterprise Security and Architecture at Hill Physicians Medical Group. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to John.
Thanks, Carol, and welcome everyone. Welcome to, if you're, well, hopefully you're staying safe and healthy out there and hopefully seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm in the East Coast of the US, and I get to officially say we're over the hump for the final week of April of 2020. I think in the future, when we think back to April of 2020, we'll say, well, the only good thing about it was it finally did turn into May. And we're almost there. We're almost ready to move on to the next stage of our adventure here. And I think today's What Works is going to touch a lot of hot buttons for companies that are looking at maintaining visibility and security performance in these changing times. So we've got a lot of good things to do. The What Works program is one of my favorite things to do at SANS. I joined SANS about 8 years ago after almost 14 years as the lead security analyst at Gartner. And at Gartner, the top page view research notes we used to do, obviously the Magic Quadrants were the most famous one. Those got the most page views on the websites, the most downloads. But right after that were case study research notes. And it took me a while to figure out why. But the reality is it's easy to find failure stories in security. The press shows us failure stories every day when somebody gets breached or broken into or has denial of service or hit by ransomware. But it's hard to find the success stories, the security professionals that implemented things and put in place processes and technologies and helped the business do the right things while keeping the bad guys out. So when I joined SANS, one of the things I did was take over some existing programs, some older programs, and start up some new ones to essentially celebrate successes. So SANS, the training and where we've seen companies succeed is all built around sort of excellence and efficiency and effectiveness of the security operations team. So sort of modeled it after the triad of people, process, and technologies. And there's a program I do called What Works. That's each year we celebrate the people in security that made a difference, did something, made positive progress in security in what might have seemed like a small area at the time, but was something very few other people could do or could not overcome the obstacles or really showed measurable value. And that sort of celebrates the people side of things. On the technology side, we do lots of things. We do lots of these webinars with vendors to help get the dialogue going between the SANS community and the vendors on the technology out there. SANS instructors often do these product reviews where they do hands-on testing of the products and give you the lowdown there. I like to view the What Works program as sort of the part that pulls the two together, where it is sponsored by vendors. They find a user who's willing to talk to me. We do an interview, and that's what we're going to do here on the webinar, and sort of go through the processes and the mix of technology and what the business problem was and why they ended up choosing a certain product and how did it work and what sort of lessons learned. And that's what we're going to go through here today. So let me give you a little idea of the flow. It's pretty simple. I'm going to do an overview. This particular case study hits a lot of interesting hot buttons I've had over the years of sort of these like leading indicators of very cool things that if they're actually done, end up with not only increasing the effectiveness of security, but the efficiency of the security team. And you'll see as we go through this when I go through the overview. Then Juan Canales of HPMG and I will walk through the interview questions in the What Works case study format. We'll leave lots of time at the end for questions. I will also be watching the questions window in that toolbar you see on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have questions for me or for Juan as we go along, enter them in there. I'll try to get to some of them as we go along as well. But again, we'll have time at the end. If you're watching a recorded version of this webinar, at the end, I'll give you an email address where you can send your questions in and we'll get you the answers afterwards. So with that, let's get started. So SANS, we do, there's a picture of the Q&A panel where you can enter your questions as we go along. At SANS, we do a lot of surveys each year. A couple of the big ones we have done this year so far. The first was, we called it the Spending Trends Study. We weren't trying to find out the dollar volume of what everybody's spending on. That's really only of interest to vendors. We were trying to find what areas CISOs and SOC managers felt they needed to change their spending and what was driving it. So the first thing we asked was, what was the biggest disruptor to your existing security program? This was done towards the end of 18 into end of 19 into the beginning of 2020. And you see up there, maintaining my security monitoring as we moved out to the cloud was by far the #1. And then security of cloud-based services and things like cloud access security brokers and cloud-specific tools was #2. And skills came in a close third. And you see lots of other things after that, but very common denominator in the qualitative interviews I did with CISOs and SOC managers was, as we moved to the cloud, we were forced to do it at a pace maybe was faster than we wanted, but the business drove it. And the first thing we had to do was get back visibility and maintain asset visibility and vulnerability management, risk management, be able to mitigate. And that's #1 as the use of cloud, especially now that we're moving out to infrastructure as a service, was exploding. So that was the #1 thing, was that was top of mind for security programs this year, was essentially gaining back visibility as more and more business operation moved to the cloud. Another big survey we do each year, Chris Crowley and I do it most year, or the past couple of years, and that's the Security Operations Center survey, where we ask a lot of specific questions about security operations and the SOC and the staffing and the metrics and so on. One thing we ask each year, what are the barriers to improving the quality of SOC operations? And you see on there, lack of skilled staff once again came in #1. I do want to point out, notice lack of skilled staff is #1. If you look towards the bottom, you see high staffing requirements, or not having enough people, essentially. It's way lower. Really is more of a skills gap out there than just a plain old headcount gap. And that's something we do a lot of other webinars on SANS. You move down the line, you see lack of automation, tools that are not integrated, and alerts we can't really look into. We don't have correlation between the actual systems out there and what the alert means, and it's hard to look into. And those are sort of consistent. And you see in the columns from 2018 to 2019, most of the areas went down in barriers. So there was progress being made. But the one I want to point out is the next one down. This silo between security, incident response, and IT and network operations. That basically says we don't have a lot of integration between our SOC and our network operations center, or other things that IT does on the operations side that are really pretty critical to security. And if you look at the numbers under the yearly column, 30% listed that as an obstacle, and it stayed about the same. Really not much progress was being made. Well, we've seen this as a big issue over the years, so Chris and I always include a drill down question on SOC and NOC integration. So when we ask, pretty much 2/3 say, yeah, we really don't have much integration at all. There's a SOC and we do our thing, and there's a NOC, they have their tools, they do their things. Obviously we talk, maybe we have the same trouble ticket system, but it's really not working as anything integrated. Only about 14% say, yeah, we're fully integrated across the NOC and SOC, share tools, share visibility, work together. We don't have the numbers here, but when you start looking at the performance, performance from a point of view of various security metrics, or who had more breaches, the ones with the better NOC SOC integration usually are seeing fewer breaches and fewer security incidents. And not only are they doing that, they're quite often doing it spending a smaller percentage of the IT budget. So there's this other myth out there beyond we need to hire 3 million people. The other myth is, well, there's not enough money for security, which is often true. But quite often it's, well, wait a minute, if there's ways we could get IT operations to do things so they patched faster, they limited privileges, or if we had more visibility so more quickly we could tell them when something got out of spec and they reacted more quickly, well, then we actually end up spending a lot less on the easy things to do in security, and we can use our existing budget towards the harder things in security. So bottom line is, cloud, movement to cloud, big disruptor, highly cited by CISOs as breaking a lot of things in security. This missed opportunity for efficiencies and effectiveness, SOC NOC integration and common tools and common processes is pretty key. And those are some things we're going to hear a lot from Juan about that I think are really cool. So, if we look at the end game, you're starting to hear a lot about resiliency. We're all supposed to talk about resiliency now, and someday when the unicorns are flying around and we get to that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, we'll all be having one big happy operations resiliency center where network and ops and app dev and everybody sort of works together, security, and we're all happy. The reality is today, as we said, 2 out of 3, it's sort of security and the NOC work separately. Really a major step is to have at least cooperative security network operations where that intersection between the two, which almost invariably involves visibility as a minimum, inventory and visibility as a minimum. If we're using common tools and processes and playbooks there, can get a whole lot of bang for the buck and be a whole lot resilient long before the unicorns start flying around. So, the goal is obviously to show how we can overcome those barriers. And one thing over the years I preached at Gartner and continuing on into SANS is whenever there's these big transitions, we have an opportunity to move security either upstream or raise the bar. And one of those is the movement to cloud, whether it was as simple as, well, when we started using Office 365 in the cloud, an opportunity to turn things on and anti-spam and email authentication and malware AV. But as you start looking at, well, they're driving us to cloud, to move business operations to cloud and infrastructure as a service, what things can we bake in security and move to DevSecOps and get some new technologies integrated in? And often that transition, the part of that planning of making that transition is the way we can do it. We're in a crazy situation now. We're not really going to spend too much time addressing today's situation of the mass movement to work at home. Part of that transition, an opportunity to raise the bar in security. We'll touch on that and ask Juan some questions about how they handle that rapid movement, everybody working at home. So lots of things we can do as these transitions happen to make gains in security. Real key thing is to make sure we're thinking about metrics so that we know before we made the major change how we were helping the business in security relevant areas and what security relevant metrics were, and we can demonstrate when we did things differently, when you gave us resources or trained the people or enabled us to buy new technologies to enable new processes. Here's the business relevant progress we made. And the 3 simplest ones that are always critical: time to detect, time to contain, and time to remediate or restore. And so obviously the goal is to move to the left on all these charts, shorter times in all of those. In the SANS community, this is the survey from the incident, or the numbers from the incident response survey. You see the Ponemon reports and things, and the average to detect is often measured in months, if not years. In the typical SANS community, we're in the 24-hour or less range for average detection, and right about that same number in contain, and in time to remediate under 2 days. And that's part of the SANS community being able to do the things to be more efficient, more effective, and have those skilled people in the right positions. But the goal is still to shorten that and still move that to left and demonstrate to the business how that saves the business money, how it enables them to get to market faster, how it enables the use of new technologies, how it enables everybody to work at home as securely as if they were in the office. So with that, let's get to let's introduce Juan. And Juan, are you there? Are you off mute?
I am off mute. Thank you, John, for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about your background and the role you play at HPMG.
Hello, everyone. My name is Juan Canales. I'm the Senior Manager of Enterprise Security and Architecture at Hill Physicians Medical Group, HPMG for short. I've been there for about 8 years, and I'm in charge of security for all our applications and systems that provide care. I report to the Senior Director of Enterprise Security, Infrastructure, and Operations, who reports to the CIO. I've been in IT for about 20 years, and 10 years specifically focused on security. I've had the opportunity to work in high tech, manufacturing, financial, and now healthcare.
Okay, we have some of the information about Hill Physicians Medical Group up on the screen, but can you tell us what does it do and how large are the operations?
Yeah, HPMG is Northern California's largest independent healthcare practice association, and it consists of local hospitals and commercial health plans. We have about 12 health plans that we work with. Hill Physicians also serves about 11 counties, northern section of California, and we're primarily a payer of claims for healthcare plans and independent providers. We have about 350 or over 350 members and over 4,000 providers that we serve. And also, Health Physicians Medical Group has been in business for over 30 years, and I'm glad to be part of that team.
Okay, so from you're obviously in the medical world, HIPAA requirements and other security demands are on you, and any other particular security issues?
Yes, John. The range of security and privacy requirements at Health Physicians is very complex because, like I mentioned, our providers are independent and they have their own system. However, I have the responsibility of protecting all patient data. HPMG also has a management service organization, Primed, and that is my responsibility along with the electronic healthcare record systems and other systems that provide care. I have the responsibility of managing and protecting over 8,000 systems and about 4 petabytes of data. So it's quite wide.
Okay, this WhatWorks is sponsored by ExtraHop, so we're going to focus on your needs for products in their area. So what was the business driver that started you down the path of looking at products like ExtraHops Reveal X?
Sure. When I first joined Health Physicians Medical Group, it's been about 8 years. I joined as the enterprise architect, and one of the first tasks that I was able, or the opportunity that I got, was to develop the cloud roadmap of what the IT strategy should be for the company. HPMG was struggling with older technology. They had difficulty with scale, availability, and performance. So we wanted to move to the cloud, but we wanted to do it in such a way that we could ensure that we could be successful. And one of the main points that we had with traditional IT infrastructure was poor performance. So from a performance perspective, it was a hard sell to go from a physical traditional environment to a cloud or a virtual environment. So my main challenge was to assure that we could both monitor the infrastructure and secure it as well without impacting operations for the business. So I started looking at solutions that could provide that visibility into the environment with little to no overhead. And I found a couple of solutions, ExtraHop being one of them.
All right, before we drill down into the products, how did you do that cloud migration? Was it sort of business driven and just jumped into, or were you able to do it in a controlled manner? How did you proceed on the cloud migration?
Yeah, the cloud migration was a measured and sequential approach. The business wanted to move forward with 100% cloud computing, and we wanted to make sure that we could do it safely. And we needed to learn first what the impact was going to be on operations if we were to make this move. So once we were able to step into cloud services, then we could learn and see how to secure it, how to manage that private cloud, and then potentially then look for other opportunities to move to other clouds, such as public software as a service or infrastructure as a service. But it needed to be a measured approach, and that's what we ended up doing, is building a roadmap that could help us step into pure cloud.
So where in that process did you start figuring out you needed to do something to make sure you had that visibility into performance and security?
It was really early in the IT roadmap, John, and it was, again, because we already had suffered performance issues with traditional IT. We wanted to harden our infrastructure and make sure that it's secure. So we wanted to make sure that the IT roadmap had the necessary tools to ensure the performance and also the security. So what we did is we introduced ExtraHop primarily initially for performance monitoring capabilities. And then we saw that as we were leveraging ExtraHop, it could be used as a security tool as well. Eventually, ExtraHop introduced its focus on security. They saw the potential, and we worked with ExtraHop to adopt some of these new technologies that they were introducing, such as Reveal X. And now we run both their performance appliances as well as their security appliances. And thanks to ExtraHop, now we have a good visibility into our traditional IT infrastructure as well as our cloud infrastructure.
Okay, can you walk us through the process you used to evaluate competing products, who you looked at, and what you did, and why you ended up choosing ExtraHop?
Yeah, we ended up doing bake-offs, proof of concepts. Our process generally is to create an evaluation criteria that helps us narrow down the choices. And we selected 3 candidates. At that level, we are looking for not only how much can we solve the problem, but also what is the cost and how fast we can execute. And we leverage vendors such as Intervision for this type of research. We brought the candidates in and we talked to them about their solution and how practical it is to deploy it, manage it. And we use tools like Gartner, peer reviews, Magic Quadrant, like you mentioned earlier in the introduction. And the vendors were able to give us solutions or plans on how to achieve our goals. So we ended up choosing 3 products to evaluate. And at the end, we noticed that we selected App Dynamics, for instance, Dynatrace and ExtraHop. But the major difference was the ability to monitor more devices at a minimal cost and having better performance at achieving that visibility.
So when you say performance, what do you mean? Was that network utilization, endpoint performance, or what was the performance benefit or advantages?
The traditional aspect of an APM is that some of them, they claim to be agentless, but the minute you start to run their performance, they do some sort of queries or calls, like WMI calls to systems for Windows. And that tends to cause overhead. Some other tools also, if you want to increase the visibility, you have to put an agent. And what we notice is that the agents at the beginning, they consume, less than 1% or 2% of the resources. But as you start to increase the metrics that you want to collect, so does the overhead of the agent. And the differences between those traditional APM tools and ExtraHop was that ExtraHop approach was listen to the wire, and the wire already has some data that you can collect as to what's going on in the network. So we were able to detect performance such as late.
Whoop, Juan, I lost your audio. Carol, is it just not me hearing Juan, or do you?
I don't hear him either. Let me send him a message. Oh, there he is.
Oh, you back, Juan?
Yes. Did I lose you guys?
Yeah, we had a little blip in audio, but I think you're just about finished up on the performance issue. We did have a real-time interrupt question here for you. The question was, who did you mention you partnered with on the evaluation? Did you say Intervision, or could you explain who you partnered with, or what you meant by that?
Yes. We use different value-add vendors. One of them is Intervision. We leverage them for our infrastructure procurement and also our security tool procurement. They were able to help us do the research, do the legwork, and then bring our solutions to the table for us to do bake-offs.
Okay, perfect. All right, so you said performance was a major factor. Were there any other reasons besides performance that why you chose ExtraHub?
Yes, as an enterprise architect, one of the things that I was in charge of was to understand the environment, build graphs or diagrams of how the systems interact with each other, and also design systems for improved performance and security. So one of the things that I was able to do with ExtraHop was the ability for us to build dynamic maps. ExtraHop has a feature where it automatically detects all the flows and then composes maps of all the systems that are talking to each other. So understanding that type of data helped the business realize what things they needed to do to improve performance before they moved an application to the cloud, and also to secure it. There were vulnerabilities that were detected, and we were able to work with DevOps to fix some of these code issues and improve the visibility.
Okay, now earlier I mentioned the sort of lack of knock-sock integration or common tools and processes across it. I often see, totally different tools in use. How did you get started using the ExtraHop product for both performance and security visibility?
Yeah, one of the major use cases was we were having some performance problems with our doctors connecting to the EHR application. They were getting screen freezes, and that translated into performance problems. So we immediately ran some diagnostics or started to look at the ExtraHop metrics that we were recording, and we were able to detect by means of ExtraHop that there was a particular tool that was doing calls to the EHR system to collect metrics, and this tool was injecting an application call, a WMI call, and was running a process to collect those metrics. And this call was being done on an hourly basis, and every hour on the dot is what we experienced that disconnects or the application freezes that doctors were reporting. So thanks to ExtraHop, we were able to detect this type of performance issues, and we realized that this could be a way to also detect other types of security things that like injections of malware or questionable processes in the operating system. So we started to leverage ExtraHop not only for performance but also for security. We soon adopted Reveal X as soon as we found out that there were some machine learning capabilities that could give us more visibility and security-focused reports.
Okay, I think you sent me a few slides with a little pictures of your environment. We can give everybody an idea of how this went. So this is your sort of overall cloud architecture.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
that map. So as you can see in the middle, IT governance was one of the things that kind of glues the roadmap together. And what we determined was that we were not able to move 100%. We were only able to move a percentage over to each circle. And as we learned how to manage the applications and the data, we were able to move from the top right clockwise, right, down to public cloud. So IT governance is one of the key things that you need to have as part of your cloud roadmap, is how are you going to govern what you should put in these type of clouds and how to secure them.
Okay, and I want to talk about, have you walk us through how you deployed things. So can you, once you chose it, you had to deploy, walk us through what's involved in getting it started and getting the visibility.
Yeah, so deploying ExtraHop was fairly simple. One of the things that ExtraHop needs is the ability to inspect the traffic. So what we ended up doing is building taps into our environment. And before we started to introduce ExtraHop, we did it by means of an RSpan, the ability to do a switch port analyzer connection. And we ended up putting ExtraHop into the feed of the main switches, and we were able to collect performance metrics on the wire. However, we wanted to make sure that we didn't impact the environment because we didn't know for sure how it was going to behave. So we started slow by introducing the VLANs one at a time and reviewing the performance metrics that were being collected in Reveal X, and at the same time measuring what would the impact be, or what was the impact on the applications as we were collecting the metrics. That's how we started collecting this performance. But once we determined what the product was, the actual deployment was relatively fast. It took us days to implement it.
So how did, as you went along, how did you demonstrate benefit? Was it strictly used for operations? Or were you able to show application owners benefit, or how did it? What sort of things are you able to show as you went along?
So one of the things that we wanted to do is understand what was communicating with each other, and then also share this information with the business as well as other IT departments, and get their buy-in on the product, right? And not only was this product going to be used for performance, but it was also going to be used for security. It was also going to be used for decision making as to what to do with our applications and how to move them to the cloud. So we ended up collecting this information, running the reports, setting up meetings and talking with our department leads and getting stakeholders to buy in on the product and help us to continue to develop and grow the implementation of this ExtraHop environment.
Okay, one thing I think you mentioned when you and I were talking before the call, that you actually used it to verify that the cloud vendors were meeting the SLAs they had signed up to. Can you explain that?
Yes, a couple of use cases that we have run is we'll have a particular SLA with our partners. We'll move an application to the cloud, and then, or a hosted solution, and we want them to perform transactions at a particular rate. One example is 1,000 records per minute. And what we noticed is that we were able to measure with ExtraHop the before when it was on premise and then after it was off premise. And we were able to let the vendor know that the transactions that they committed to performing was not 1,000 records per second or transactions per minute. And so we were able to keep the vendor's SLA, keep them honest, right? And they were able to adjust their infrastructure to meet the SLAs that they agreed to.
Neat. There's often a hard thing to do, and doing that with a tool that also gave security visibility. That's one of those ways of sneaking in the security functionality. So can you walk, you've been operational for a while. Can you walk us through sort of how it's typically used operationally by the security team and any use cases you might have?
Yes. So we, like I mentioned before, John, we run both the performance ExtraHop and the security Reveal X. Both teams, the operation and security team, both use tools, but they tend to focus their operations on their specific area. So the infrastructure team tends to use the performance one, and the security tends to use the security, but we all share the information between each other to have that cohesiveness and that information to react, relatively quickly if there's an incident. So we have daily checks on the tools. We set up alerts, and we also distribute the alerts among the teams so that everybody is getting the same real-time feed as to what's going on with our environment. So we've configured also ExtraHop and Reveal X to send and export logs into Splunk, our syslog, and this also gives us the ability to have both teams leverage additional tools for further log correlation, like you mentioned earlier. That is essential. And then that's what stitches the information together as to what's going on with our environment. And then we can all rely on this real-time alerts and then also be able to respond to these events that are going on in the infrastructure.
So what's involved in setting it up and tuning it? Are there signatures or rules or patterns that ExtraHop periodically updates or pushes out? What does it take to sort of get it started to generate the alerts?
The ExtraHop was able to provide their support. Their SEs are very good, and they helped us do the initial implementation part of the POC. And then also we had part of the procurement is to have professional services get involved. And one of the things that they were able to do is installed bundles that are already pre-programmed. They already have some sort of like thresholds and metrics that you would want to see. One bundle in particular, for instance, that we were able to implement is called the Cloud Bundle, and it helped us visualize what our users were using in the cloud, whether they were Office 365, whether it was Google, YouTube, etc. These cloud applications. So installing the bundle was fairly easy. Download the package, upload the package, and then attach it to a device group or a particular device. And then the alerts start sending themselves out once you've configured those bundles.
Okay, we had a question come in just to clarify. We still have the architecture up here on the screen. The visibility and the use of it extends into the sort of your physical premise data centers and your user networks as well as into the cloud, or are you only using it out in the cloud?
We are using it on premise, and as we're consuming cloud services from the on-premise, we have visibility into what's being consumed in the cloud. So one of the things that we do today is we have all our users do their work from virtual desktops. So we enforce the user to work locally within the data centers. And that's one of the ways that we can ensure that we have visibility over what users are doing with our data, if that makes sense.
Okay. You can't really do a webinar these days without talking about what happened when everybody was forced to work with home. So how did you find that happening, and were you able to maintain the visibility and any use cases of using the tool and dealing with issues of everybody working from home now?
Yeah, we were always able to support remote workers. The difference between before and now is that today we needed to support 100% of the company to work remotely. So that's the difference. The experience has been that in the past we used to have 150 concurrent remote workers, and they used to work only like on Fridays. Now we have about 700 concurrent remote workers that we have to support. And with ExtraHop, it's been pretty straightforward to monitor the activities of our remote workers and secure our remote workers. One of the things that I can mention that was kind of funny is an incident that happened is that the second week of working from home, and there was an incident where after lunch, we had our employees calling in saying that they couldn't connect. And through means of ExtraHop, we quickly determined that it was not a DDoS attack. That was one of the first things that we thought. It was that someone in IT had made a change in the configuration of our virtual desktops and mistakenly created a whitelist by adding their username in a section of the VDI configuration. And so they didn't know that that was going to happen, that it was going to be turned into a whitelist. So with ExtraHop Reveal X, it helped us to determine where was the problem, that it was a configuration issue. It wasn't an issue with infrastructure. It wasn't an issue with security, like an attack. We were able to look at the baseline of how people were connecting remotely before and then after, and we were quickly able to respond to that incident.
Okay, got a couple more of my standard questions, and we'll get to some of the other audience questions that have come in here. Let's go through the final couple standard questions. So you mentioned a little bit about the tech support you use from ExtraHop. So Pat, how do you rate it? I always ask how people rate the support.
Yeah, their support is great. I have not had the need to open up a lot of support tickets, but when I do, the response is relatively great and quick. Primarily, I use the engineers, the SEs. They constantly check on the health of our environment and make sure that we're using ExtraHop to its full potential. They inform us of potential upgrades, release notes, things that we might be able to use in our environment. And so they're in constant communication with us to help us understand how we can leverage ExtraHop better as they develop new features into the product.
Okay, final standard question. Always like to see if there's any lessons learned that can be passed on. So based on what you know now after being operational for a while, is there something you'd do differently at the start knowing what you know now, or other lessons learned you can pass on to the audience?
Yes. And I chuckled because it was a painful experience, is that, as I mentioned earlier, we first started with doing a tap by means of a port span and a switch. And we did not understand what that meant in terms of performance once the bandwidth started to ramp up. And in essence, what we learned is that you slow down the switch when you do a port span. So what we did is we ended up implementing a tap system by means of Gigamon. And that's what you see in this slide right here, security visibility. This is the end state. This is the better state. We moved away from port span to a physical tap and a virtual tap. This allowed us to remove the latency that was in the switches from 50 milliseconds to 5 milliseconds or less. So we learned the hard way that this was a better way to create, to split the traffic, reduce performance impact on the environment, and be able to collect more visibility of our systems. And the second thing that we learned was that ExtraHop, as other products like Explorer appliances, they collect summaries of the flows, and they provide them as physical appliance and virtual appliances. We went ahead and bought virtual appliances, but what we noticed is that type of those types of tools do require some significant performance. So if I could do it again, I would actually go back and buy physical appliances instead of virtual appliances. And then that would leave our virtual farm available only for business applications and not consume it for the security applications or the security tools as well.
Okay, sort of related to that, we had a question about how you're acquiring the wire data in the virtual farm. So can you explain? I guess those orange elements in there are the where you have GVM and GFM. Can you explain how that works?
Yes. So Gigamon has physical taps, optical taps, copper taps. Those are the ones that are on the top, illustrated by a T. In the virtual farm, you'll see a GVM. Essentially what it is it's a virtual VM that taps into the virtual switch. And the virtual switch has a port mirror to the GVM. The GVM is being managed by the Gigamon Fabric Manager, and that's what is illustrated there as GFM. In the Gigamon Fabric Manager, we define the rules as to what to tap. We can be smart about what data we want to track, and so we can filter data so that we don't impact performance. And in this case, we are able to track not only north and south traffic with the physical taps, but we were also able to track east and west traffic by means of the virtual tabs in the virtual farm.
Okay, and you show RevealX. I think you said that's being used by the security side, and then there's ExtraHop performance. Can you explain the sort of roles in IT ops that would be using the ExtraHop performance stuff and how that integrates in?
Yes. So the Gigamon solution allows us to provide the feeds of the data into multiple tools. Essentially, it's a security switch. So our performance tools are being used primarily by the infrastructure team that consists of system engineers and network engineers. They take a look at things like S-flow, net flow data. They also take a look at and make sure that certain things are being configured correctly. So if, for instance, they expect certain traffic to flow from one direction to another direction. That's what they use primarily as the tool. The security team will use RevealX, and the security team primarily uses RevealX to enforce the security posture. So if we have a rule that says no foreign IP address can reach a particular device, ExtraHop will automatically detect it, and then the security team will go and work with the infrastructure team to correct the access policy on the firewalls to remediate that particular issue. That's just one example of how we work together.
Okay, we had a couple questions around use of it. So you mentioned the sort of self-inflicted DDoS attack of the whitelist. What if when you found that it really was a DDoS attack? How would you have used it, and what would the next steps have been?
So one of the things that we tend to do is we learn from our mistakes, and we end up building playbooks on some of the incidents that we've encountered over the past. So I would say that we would look back into our security playbooks and then react to the incident based on what we've learned in the past. Sometimes these incidents are not quite straightforward, so you may have to do something off the playbook. For these type of incidents, we have a dedicated team who is the task force that will react to this. And so that incident response team will evaluate the issue, and then we'll coordinate with other teams in terms of what we need to do to remediate the issue.
Okay, now we've all heard a lot about attacks against the healthcare system since the COVID virus hit. What sort of things are you seeing against your remote workforce? What sort of security issues, and how are you dealing with them?
What we have seen by means of ExtraHop is we've seen the rise of COVID emails like phishing campaigns, and we're able to detect some of these campaigns by extracting the message header and looking at things that are from external addresses that are malicious. And then also we're looking for keywords such as COVID. And we're able to create filters based on what we see. The other thing too that we've seen as a primary issue is that there's a sense of privacy that people seem to have when they're at home. So they take on additional risk in the websites that they browse or the content that they download. So that's what we've seen in ExtraHop is the rise of these types of activities. So we today use ExtraHop to remediate some of these issues, and our primary tool against those types of incidents is security awareness training. Educate the user to be safer in the work that they do while at home.
Okay, I think we can fit one more question in here. We're nearing the end of the time period. Obviously, ExtraHop's product you had to buy and pay for and convince management to fund it. Are there any metrics you're able to point to, whether they're security or IT ops metrics, or that you can say, yeah, here's the measurable value we got from deploying this product?
Yes, the primary value that we get out of ExtraHop is the ability to track some of these incidents into summaries. So the security team collects some of these incidents and creates a catalog. And we have routine meetings with leadership to show them all the protection that this tool is providing to us. And that's how we're able to work with management to continue the spend on security tools and to understand how essential these tools are. But it is a collaboration between the infrastructure team, the security team, and then also educating the leadership to show them these measurable results.
Okay, thanks, Juan. We're pretty much running out of time here. I did want to leave everybody with some resources. There's the URL for where this WhatWorks paper will be published, as well as other ones we've done in the past. I did mention the Difference Makers Award. If you think your team is doing something, or you know of somebody doing something cool in security, you'll find instructions there on, well, actually right now you'll see the list of the previous year's winners. Towards the September timeframe, we'll put up the nominations or the call for nominations for this year's awards, and it's perfectly okay to nominate your own team or other people you know. There's ExtraHop's URL. We can get more information from them. If you are watching a recorded version of this, or I just missed your question, or you thought of it too late for you live viewers, you can send your questions to q@sans.org, and we'll get you the right person to give you the right answer. There's my URL, my email address for any comments or questions you might have of me. So with that, I'm going to turn things over back to Carol for any final words.
All right, thank you so much, John and Juan, for your great presentation, and to ExtraHop for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.